This is Story Quest, brand new stories you'll want to hear again and again.
King of the Woods. Badger lived alone in the woods and tended his garden. It was a nice garden around a cosy burrow, and his life was okay. But truth be told, he was, well, a little bit lonely. He was the only badger in the woods and often felt a bit grumpy about his state of affairs. There were whole families of rabbits, pairs of magpies and gangs of foxes. They all had each other for company, but with whom to play? No one came to play with him. No matter how long he waited and peered out of the burrow, he'd sit and wait and wait and wait for something to happen, for someone to call around, but no one ever did. He spent most of the days and nights alone, which gave him a lot of time to think. Now, thinking time is an excellent thing. Having space to let your imagination roam can help you come up with all manner of great ideas. However, having too much time to think about things can make you go around in circles and come up with ideas that are, well, less than great. This is what happened to Badger. One chilly autumn week, he had slept for a very long time and had a wonderful dream about a king who was loved by all his subjects, who bowed down to him and had to do what he said, and played with him if he wanted some company. When he woke up, he had what he thought was a brilliant idea. I shall be king of the woods, then everyone will have time to play with me. He made himself a cloak of bark and a crown of laurel leaves and decided that there was no time to lose in making sure everyone heard the news. Badger swished his cloak around himself and decided to take a tour of his kingdom, whether the animals liked it or not. He paraded past the fox's burrow. "Come on out, one and all, bow before your king," he yelled. The foxes were too busy to keep up with current events and so thought maybe there had always been a king, and so quickly lined up and bowed deeply. This made Badger feel very important. He paraded to where the squirrels nested in the high oaks and called up, "Subject squirrels, come out and bow before your king." The squirrels peered at one another and scampered down to bow. It never paid to annoy a badger, especially one who was, well, apparently king? Who knew? Badger's heart swelled and he felt happy that he'd instantly made so many new friends. Well, not exactly friends. They were technically subjects, he supposed. Was there a difference? Over the days that followed, he had the animals running around left, right and centre, doing errands for him and helping him in his garden. He made the foxes play tag, insisting that they always let him win. After all, winning was the best feeling, wasn't it? He swanned around in his cloak and crown, not doing very much, but feeling very important. He noticed that the rabbits in the nearby copse didn't seem to be particularly impressed with what was going on. And come to think of it, they hadn't bowed down to him, not even once. He decided to march over to put this right. "Rabbits, I proclaim myself king of the woods, and you all have to do what I say. Bow before your king immediately." Lacking courtiers at this point, he was obliged to blow his own fanfare with his own trumpet, fashioned from a hollowed out stick. Toot toot! He vowed to work on a better trumpet when he had a moment. The rabbits nearby looked quizzically at each other. Rabbits are a lot more savvy than you probably realise, and much to his surprise, they didn't instantly fall into low bows like the others. "King of the woods, is that a thing?" whispered the largest rabbit to her sister. "I don't remember us having a king before." "Well, I can't say I remember one either, but we rabbits aren't very old. Maybe we should ask Brown Bear. He's been in the woods longer than anyone." shouted Badger. "If thee dost not bow, I shall throw thee into thy forest jail." Ignoring the very frustrated looking Badger, they hopped over to the bear's lair, which was a dark cave in a shady corner of the woods. They approached somewhat nervously, it has to be said. After all, he was very large and bunnies were not. And they might look a little bit like a delicious snack if he was hungry. Excuse me, Brown Bear, can we have a word? They called into the cave. A voice came booming back in the echoey black of the opening. What is it? I'm trying to hibernate. Always some infernal interruption, he grumbled. It'll only take a minute, implored the bunnies, edging closer to the cave's entrance. There was a pause. And then a large sigh. And then the padding of large paws and Brown Bear appeared. He was not looking best pleased, and so the rabbits tried to be quick. We wondered if there was such a thing as King of the Woods. Badger's decided he's the king and wants us all to bow to him, and we're not really sure what to do. After all, you don't want to upset a king now, do you? Brown Bear squinted at them and then began to laugh. He laughed so hard he rolled on his back, clutching his stomach with his enormous paws, gasping for air. Eventually he stopped and wiped the tears from his eyes. Oh, and what on earth made you believe what he said? The bunnies looked at each other. He's a bit bigger than us and more cleverer. I doubt that, observed Brown Bear. And in any case, even if someone is bigger and more clever, it doesn't mean they get to do anything they want. And he's a bit scary too. He said he'd lock us in the forest jail if we didn't do as he said. Forest jail? Forest jail? Why, the poor fellow must have lost his mind. There's no such place. And there's no such thing as the King of the Woods either. Never has been, never will be. We're an ecosystem. We all have our place and no one is more important than anyone else. The rabbits looked astonished and a little bit relieved. Could you have a word with him? The largest rabbit said pleadingly. He's really beginning to get on everyone's nerves with the whole thing. Brown Bear lumbered over to Badger's lair where he was perched on a throne of maple branches. The foxes and squirrels had got bored and wandered off. Rumours had begun to circulate that there was no such thing as King of the Woods, and they didn't much like having to do a whole lot of errands for someone else. Who would? Come forth, ye venerable Brown Bear, and kneel before your king, said Badger grandly. Why are you talking like that? Brown Bear said, distinctly not kneeling. Bear's knees don't really bend that way without a lot of fuss, and he wouldn't even if they did. And who made you king? I did, so there. And how's the whole thing working for you? Badger looked at Brown Bear suspiciously. What do you mean? He said, shoving his crown of laurel leaves up. It was getting in his eyes. You can't be a king without subjects, Bear indicated the empty garden. The squirrels and foxes had long since scampered back to their homes. And you can't be king just because you say you are. Come on, old fellow. See sense. Badger's shoulders slumped. But as king, people have to play with me and do what I say. No one did before. I was lonely. Bear felt a bit sorry for Badger and put a paw on his shoulder. You don't need to be a king to make friends. In fact, kings often have a great deal of trouble making friends, so I hear. At least good ones. Just be yourself. Let people get to know the real you. Badger had a good think and realised that it had been rather silly. Much as he wanted to be King of the Woods, surveying the empty garden, he began to realise that no one else particularly wanted that, and so he was, when it came down to it, playing on his own once more. So Badger put his cloak and crown away. He invited all the animals into his garden for a bonfire feast to say sorry, with the fire made from the branches of the maple throne. He'd never invited anyone into his garden, just his friends, preferring to sit and mope and wait for something to happen. It turned into the most marvellous party that would be talked about for years to come. And do you know something else marvellous happened? By opening his garden and his heart to the animals, he began to make friends. Real friends. Not people to boss around or order to bow. The squirrels brought delicious acorns just because they thought he might like them, and the foxes challenged him to a game of tag. He could tell they were friends and not subjects because they didn't let him win. Well, not always. And whether he won or lost, well, it felt good, much better than it ever had when he was king of the woods. Who knew?
Thanks for coming on a story quest with us. If you like that story, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you never miss an episode.